It's our first documentary in about a year. Melissa, welcome. Good to have you aboard.
Hi, thank you.
And the Raybows are here. Arlene Schwimmer is here. Her driver will join us soon.
Arthur is on his way.
Okay.
Here he is.
Hi there, Jim.
Hi, Arthur.
And hello, everybody.
Hi.
And hello to welcome Julian Ken Uslan. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Oh, long you, but smile. As long as you're smiling when you say it, it doesn't matter.
Right. It doesn't matter what you call me as long as you call me. And I see Elena Pelton there. We have a new title, Body Care Regenerative Medicine. Sounds good. Ilona. Is that you? Or is that Arlene?
No, it's Arlene Warchel.
Arlene Warchel. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to do name shaming there. Welcome. Good to see you again. All right, we're around 7:30. Roy Logan is new and he's joining us. Hello, Michael Chasquez.
Roz, did you want to say something? You're muted. You're muted, Roz.
Muted, Roz.
I'm with Barbara and she can't get in.
Well,
On your
what
own
can
computer?
I say?
I can't get in. And it
I
says
don't know why.
It says waiting for the host to start meeting.
You want to
Well,
join?
that would be Hannah. Could you let Barbara Balaban in?
I'm ready
She's
to
not
finish
she's not in
up.
the waiting room.
Okay.
Maybe she's using on the old link from the 22nd and not the link for tonight.
Make sure you're using tonight's link, Barb.
Okay.
You'll
I'm
see it if
letting
you.
people in.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's the one. Yes, it's the one from. I'll try again.
Okay. You can go to Wilshire Boulevard Temple Home, and you'll see Saturday's lineup, and you click on the register, and that'll show you the link when you do that.
I did.
Roy, welcome. I think we saw you once before.
And the previous
Welcome to
time,
drink.
this is my third visit.
Good. Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
what's your name
welcome
again?
back. I guess we didn't offend you
Hannah.
enough.
Oh, do you want me to pay you?
Yeah, I had a register.
Nothing. Okay, let's get started. It's after 7:30. We have a pleasantly foolish house tonight. I want to talk about documentaries because we don't usually see them. We've seen a few that were very powerful in past years.
You have to let me in, Fern. It says that.
I will, Barbara, but you cannot do it next to Roz. You got to go in another room.
Oh.
No, I'm in. I'm in.
No, it will be hard for us to, you'll make a noise for us.
It'll be feedback because both speakers will be on,
Okay.
or both audio will be
Please to
on.
make it louder.
Jim, go ahead. Why don't you?
Okay, so Hannah and Fern, if you'll mute everybody so I can hog the floor for a few minutes.
Okay, Jim, then unmute yourself.
All right. Okay, go ahead. All right. So if you can all hear me, Mickey Alter's with us and Abby Barron, welcome, and Judy Pies, hi. We often treat documentaries differently because we have lower expectations for them. Oh, it's just boring footage. It's not beautifully lit. The people aren't beautiful. It's not focused. It's broader. It moves slower. There are all kinds of biases about documentaries as being not as much fun or not as meaningful. That's been changing over the years, especially when the cost of making films has come down and the sophistication of documentary filmmakers has increased, and the ease of editing has increased. Documentary filmmakers often shoot many more hours of material to get the 90 minutes that they'll show you. But there are similarities between documentaries that I think we're taking for granted now between narrative films. Documentaries tell stories, and like dramatic films or even thrillers or action movies, you have to establish who are the characters and how do we, the audience, feel about the characters, and what is the central problem that we're all trying to solve. Why are we watching this story? What do we need to get to by the end? And if you look at this film, it's classic storytelling in the best feature film terms. Does anybody want to tell us how the movie starts out? Remember the interviews process?
Jerry, if you'll unmute yourself, you can start us out.
You're muted.
Okay.
Okay,
Jerry,
So-
lean forward and tell us.
It starts out showing you an ad in the paper for a man between 80 and 90. Then a set of interviews between different characters who, for a variety of reasons, are rejected and
okay.
accepted.
What are those reasons, though? I think that's why the sequence exists. What do they all show? These 80 to
One guy
90-year-old
doesn't
men?
know technology. One guy doesn't know, I think, different languages. But Sergio is sophisticated, and so he gets the position.
Well, he has one advantage over another guy who says his wife probably isn't going to like it. Sergio's a widower. But each of these little vignettes has a secret piece of laughter in it, whether they don't understand a cell phone or how to turn it on or off or FaceTime, how they answer the questions. It's a great little slice of senior citizens as we know them, even though they're from Chile. This is shot just outside of Santiago. So immediately we're told what the problem is. The Romulo, the detective, says, this is the job if you choose to accept it. And we learn very quickly that he has picked Sergio to do it. So we don't need to know anything else more about the others, but it sort of sets Sergio apart because now we can see what distinguished him. But Sergio's a bit of a headache, isn't he? You know, there are problems with Sergio. This is called character development. And what are the problems with Sergio? Right? He gets distracted. He's fumbling on the phone. And Romulo really regrets, oh my God, what am I going to do with this guy? He can't report back to me anything he finds. And then probably the most important scene is when his daughter comes in. And this is sort of getting down to the brass tacks of who Sergio is. So who wants to analyze what Sergio says while his daughter is silent next to him? You know, the question is, we want you to be comfortable, daughter, when your father goes away for 3 months. And he has to explain to her why this is important to him. So what does he say? Natalie. Unmute. Let's unmute
Yes,
everybody.
He says he can't stop thinking about his wife who just died about 3 months earlier. He has nothing to do. He's just walking around the apartment and he needs a distraction. And he said, this may make me feel like I once felt when I had a job.
He uses the term liberation. You know, I need this for
Liberation from his grief.
Right. So that's sort of his motive, right? Think detective story. And I don't know if you noticed, but there's detective and spy music going on throughout this, in and out of the film. And it's a spoof of James Bond or film noirs, you know, classic Hollywood musical motifs that sound like they're suspenseful, whereas these people are just ordinary citizens, ordinary people. Romulo, of course, is he's a seasoned showman because he's a private detective and he's a salesman and he's a lot more comfortable. But these other people are just showing who they are. And
Jim,
that works.
I just wonder if you could answer a technical question,
Yeah.
which, you know, I think about from the beginning to end of such documentaries. How does I do this? I mean, people, how is it real and not acted?
Well, that's the amazing thing about the whole film, isn't it? You're seeing many different kinds of senior women, and really only Sergio's a man, being truly who they are, unmasked, because they don't think they're being filmed really. Well, this is my understanding of how the film was made. Romulo is posing as his son, or godson, I think, and wants to have his father live there. So he's done the tour and says he wants to make a film about the man and gets permission to have the cameras there in advance of Sergio's arrival. So I don't know how long it took them to get the little vignettes, you know, to do the flower watering and the people, you know, there's one woman who's watering the flowers while holding a wheelchair with the other hand. All that background footage, it didn't necessarily happen in the moment, but you get good stuff like that just by hanging around. So they had clearance. The director of the nursing home allowed the cameras to be there, but they didn't know why they were really there, that it came from a real private investigator. And that's the secret that the private investigator and the woman director have. You saw her very early when Sergio puts on the glasses and he moves his head slowly around the room, and there's a woman at the end of the pan, and that's the director. And you see one of the cameras and somebody else behind Romulo. So that's how they did it technically, legally. Maybe our own privacy laws here are a little different than in Chile, because clearing the patients and then releasing it as a film would really, that would be difficult to do here. But somehow they did it with immunity. So it was a bit of a trick on the nursing home, but the nursing home in the end, of course, was acquitted, in the film's estimation. So is that enough of an answer, Fern? Is that?
Yeah,
We
it's
guess.
just hard to imagine people forget about the camera because they indicated they knew they were being filmed.
Right. There's a wonderful moment where the microphone dips into frame and one woman tries to alert her friends on the bench. It's hilarious. She thinks it's like this Martian coming down from a spaceship, and don't let them know we know they're there. It's hilarious. And there are all these little gems throughout the film that are really pleasing, very well observed, and the filmmakers wisely and sensitively included them. I think, Fern, what you're noticing is that the more cameras hang around, the less people do notice them. They get tired of being on their best behavior and they revert to themselves. Now, Michael Chask is another veteran of the reality television wars. Michael, do you want to affirm that?
Yeah, I mean, reality, they don't really have the time to shoot at the same length as a documentary feature can, where they can really spend months to capture a single story. And actually, after watching the movie this afternoon, I did a little bit of Googling and discovered that they shot 300 hours of footage for this film. So, it clearly was over quite a long period. And yeah, people, I think, do get desensitized to the fact that they're being filmed, and they just eventually begin behaving.
Mm-hmm. There's always a camera in the garden, so they're not looking at us, even if they are. It becomes part of the wallpaper.
I think probably my guess is that people just ultimately, they are who they are. And if you stick around long enough, they can't contain it. As a lawyer, that you tell people, don't say that, don't say that. But if you talk to them long enough, they say it.
Right, right. Even in court or in deposition.
Especially in court. Yeah.
Yeah. It's great because they have to get the truth out about themselves. And that's the charming thing about this documentary, is that they allowed us into their lives in a very deep and intimate way. And we'll cover those landmark moments as we go through it. So everybody's kind of charmed by him, right? The first person he meets is this lovely woman who has a stroke later on. And if you think of the first scenes with her, when he greets her, when he talks to her, I think he's, isn't he rolling a ball of yarn for her? Is that her? Yeah. And it's like their first interaction, and says goodbye. And this is kind of a setup, because when she has a stroke later on, totally different person and a totally different relationship with Sergio. So when we track what's called the character arc of characters in feature films or in documentaries, it's like something has changed between rolling the ball of yarn for her and him telling her it's okay to cry because you're scared and you're having a stroke. And then she cries on camera. She puts her hands to her face and she's totally bereft. And believe me, I'm somewhat familiar with it. It's very scary, especially when you're not around your family. And he gives her permission to be herself with her own fear. So that implies a transition. He's come to mean something to her, that she could do that with him. Now, what's also funny about that is there's another scene with the two of them in between. Does anybody recall what that is? He encounters her and he says, "Hi, how are you?" And she said, "I don't remember you." And he said, "Well, you were always lucent when you were with me." And she says, "Well, I just don't remember talking to you." And he says, "You see, you're very present and coherent now, and you were all the other times I talked to you. You just forgot." So he has this way of saying, yeah, your memory's affected, but you're still you, and I get it. So that's his very sweet way. And nobody wrote lines for him. This is all Sergio. It's who he is. And in a way, he's fulfilling his own prophecy about, I'm going to be engaged with this work. This is going to be really interesting to me. And he proves it in just little ways. And, you know, if I'm saying things in ways that are wrong, seem wrong to you, speak up. But I think if we express how he's handling himself and the other people in each of the scenes, we realize this guy's really intuitive and very sensitive to the needs of other people. At the same time, he's a spy. He's a charlatan. He's deceiving them all, but ethically, no. He's not really deceiving them because he knows he has a worthy mission to pursue. So he puts on his Robin Hood cape and he gets to work and really embraces it.
Steve, did you want to say something?
Mona did.
Mona?
I had a question, Jim. I was very curious as to what Sergio's background was. I found him so courtly and polite, while at the same time able to get people to trust him. He seemed like a truly honorable, decent person. I was very curious as to what he had done.
I mean, that's certainly, the women at the home also felt that way, didn't they?
Oh, yes, they all loved him.
They were lining up, right?
Yeah.
But Berta got to him first by declaring.
They were all falling for him.
Yeah, well, it's look, there was something like 40 women or 60 women and 4 men.
Yeah.
And one of them we saw twice was clearly out of it. And one was licking his dessert from the plastic container. Although I admit I've done that too, but there was something a little off about him. So he was the catch that came in, you know, and he was immediately crowned king at the anniversary celebration, which is, it's so much like a high school homecoming. Is like, you know, they bring the woman in on a chair and the queen, and they've never met before. It's just a hoot. But let's talk about.
I mean, the filmmakers obviously chose not to dwell on his background.
Right. I don't know why. You know, it's like it would be good to know, but he proved himself. I mean, you know, you trust him. So, but he was a courtly gentleman and very well spoken. You know, just a great therapist. But I want to talk about the first observation of, you know, he goes around looking at the names and the room numbers, and he photographs a dirty bathroom. So that's a strike against the home. But then Marta's the one who's always at the iron gate saying, oh, please let me out of here. Take me with you. She's, you know, clearly a little bit off. And she gets a phone call from probably a clerical worker in another room pretending to be her mother. So how do people feel about that deception? Is that ethical or not? I get, you know, is it okay because the end was well-intentioned? You'll notice that Marta is forever the child. You know, her mother's probably long gone. She said, I lost my textbook. Yeah, Fern.
Well, I have a cousin who became, you know, suffered from dementia and very severe short-term loss, and his wife died. His wife of many, many years. And they told him she died. And the next day he would say, where's Bella? And then they would tell her, and he would grieve all over again. So this went on. At some point they wound up saying, this is not a kindness. It's just better to say, right. She'll be here later, because he didn't remember it. So I think that in some ways, it's more of a kindness than truth telling is not always kind. Right.
It's you know, it's not the golden rule. It's what would the other person want me to do for them?
Judy, did you want to say something? Unmute yourself.
So I have a friend whose mother was dying in Chicago and was a hardcore Cubs fan.
said,
And
where's
they
mother?
told-
And
Really?
I had to say, Dad, she's been gone for 9 years. And his face dropped. And it dropped not because of her, but because of his recognition that he forgot. So even
Jim, before you go on, I think Judy was speaking.
Yeah, I was
Sorry.
saying that I have a friend whose mother was dying in Chicago, and she was a hardcore Cubs fan. And this was at the time when the Cubs were in the playoffs. And they told her, I think on her last day of life, that the Cubs had won the World Series. And I think that was beyond sweet. And I also wanted to say that I watched this film a couple of months ago. In fact, I think I told you about it, Jim, at the time I watched it. And it was right before I went to visit my mother, who's 98, in her nursing home in Tennessee. And by the end, I was absolutely dissolved in tears, because to me, the message of the film is that the home was doing as good a job as they could possibly do for these people. And the real problem was loneliness and the fact that the families didn't come to visit. And of course, we couldn't visit for the last year, but I was just so sad for all of these people, and for my mother, and for all the people in her nursing home, where the people are also doing the best job that they can do. So
you know what? Go ahead.
A real exoneration, actually, of these heroes who are, going in and doing their jobs and at great peril to themselves. Of course, that wasn't in the film.
This was shot pre-COVID.
Yeah. But I think he really exonerated them completely.
Yeah. Now you put your finger on something, Judy, that you were personally very moved because of your connection to the people in the film.
Yes.
And this is movie empathy, and it's a remarkable thing that books can do it as well, songs can do it, but movies can really penetrate the layers of your defenses and take you back in your own life. And it's a powerful, powerful tool of filmmakers. And you can see this modest documentary did as good a job as any family drama did with stars in it, because it's just so damn genuine, and in a way that makes us as viewers more accepting of them. These aren't reality stars who are putting on a show. These are just people being themselves. And the sincerity is terribly touching. And we feel that. I know I did when I watched it this afternoon.
The other thing is, I saw how similar that nursing home, retirement home was in Chile to my mother's in Tennessee, except they had much nicer grounds than my mom's place. But I mean, it's the same
Jello, huh?
It's the same decor. It's the same lousy meals. It's the same kind of stupid activities. It's all, and the people look exactly the same.
Well, we're more alike than dislike each other,
So we
all
have
over
a
the
few
world.
people who'd like to weigh in.
Yeah.
Steve, Natalie, and Melanie.
Yeah, the plants and garden was very pretty in Chile there. Yeah, I think on this issue of whether it's ethical to for the staff to pretend that the mother is calling her, it's a direct parallel to the movie Farewell, or The Farewell.
Yes.
That we saw, right?
Yep.
Where you have in that movie, obviously, the family hiding what they think are the facts and the truth from the mother about her cancer, right? And here they're similarly hiding the fact that the mother has passed from their point of view in the name of her mental health, which is what they're ultimately there for anyways, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was ethical and moral. It's a situational kind of thing. And I think that's a direct parallel.
Thanks for reminding us of the Farewell.
Natalie?
To me, this film was such a sad thing to watch. We all want to live a long life. We try to eat properly and exercise and do all the right things because we want to live for a long time. And then to see these people were probably in their 90s, that this is what you end up, the chances of you ending up like this is not so slight. So how sad to be in a place where they were, as Judith was saying, they were taken care of very, very nicely. But to feel that loneliness and feel all that sadness and not have control of your body or your mind and be in that environment, to me, it was so sad. I would have preferred if a lot of them had died earlier. And I wasn't quite sure, especially the women who talked about, I raised 4 children, she said, and not one of them comes to visit me. I wasn't sure whether she didn't remember if they had come or not, but my thinking really was that they probably didn't.
Right.
And that was so sad to me. So I saw very little humor in this film. I saw it as a statement of the pathetic situation, how many people end up if they live too long.
All right, I'll play devil's advocate to that. Yeah, it's not a great situation, but were they better off there than where else they might have been? And the other part of that question is, were they better off because Sergio joined them?
Yes.
Well, he brought some joy to their lives.
A little bit better, maybe.
But I wanted to just add something to what Natalie said, that I agree with her. I think it puts you in touch with your own mortality. And quite frankly, I've been that way this whole year. And I mean, I see my friends falling and tripping and dying all around me. And it's very painful. And then to see these people, I'm thinking, I said to Bob one day, I said, don't ever put me in a place like that. Never, ever put me in a place like that. I don't want to end up in one of those places. But I mean, we're, like you say, where are they better off there than who knows where? But
we don't know. It's a tough situation.
It's sad. It's
Nobody will agree that it's optimal or pleasant,
yeah.
But it doesn't mean we shouldn't look at it. And I think that's one thing that the filmmakers helped us with, is to take a deep look at these people whom we get to know, like the poet. She charms him. She reads him 2 poems the first time he's with her, and maybe a third. And she's the one who dies, and they read one of her poems at the end. And everybody is just stricken because of the poem, as well as losing her. And it's a reminder to them, that any one of them could go at any time.
And we have a lot of people who want to weigh in on this.
Okay, please.
Melanie, Howard.
Okay, thank you.
Joe, Melissa, and then I think, Steve, did you want to speak again?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll be at the
All
end.
right.
After
So Melanie, Howard, Joe, Melissa, and Steve.
Okay, first of all, I thought it was a really touching and sweet movie, and I saw a lot of reality in it. I work with special ed kids in school across the spectrum, and I saw that same sense of innocence and fantasy in a lot of the patients. As far as the mother aspect of the film, I found it really touching because they talked about having a mother alive or having a mother in heaven. And I thought that's very comforting to have that feeling. I also saw a lot of the mother image and the religious symbolism all around, the facility. And I didn't think it was wrong at all not to let her believe what she wanted to believe, because that mother bond seemed to be really helping people a lot. But yeah, I thought it was very touching, very realistic. I thought that he was struggling because he was set to to spy on this one woman, and it was a big challenge for him because he was getting caught up in all the different personalities and their little situations. And at the end, he just said, I'm done. But I enjoyed the movie.
Well, he was done because his work there was done.
Yeah.
He had his, we'll come back to him later. It's a wonderful ending. Thank you. Who's next?
Howard is next, then Joe, then Steve.
I thought it was interesting. I read a couple of things. One, that apparently this particular nursing home in Chile is not typical of what goes on in that country, and that generally speaking, women are kept up, live with one of their children, their daughter, or presumably a son. So they wouldn't go to a home, but most of the nursing homes in Chile have men who have no family, or have men. And the other thing was this, I have my mother having lived in a nursing home. Based on that experience, the people they had one of the women in the Chilean home died, and they had a funeral for her. It was very sweet. But in at least in my mother's home, which was a very nice Jewish home in Beverly Hills, people just disappear. They don't have funerals or celebrations. Just one day they're not there anymore, I think, based on that one.
Yes.
Thank you.
I don't know. There's I should have invited them to participate. There's a university family, the Galpers, who run a Santa Monica. They have several facilities.
Yeah, I stayed in one.
Yeah, one near the St. John's Hospital, and maybe they could have provided us with some information on that. Who's next, Fern?
Joe is. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I regularly, well, I was regularly, let's say every 60 to 90 days, I was visiting two clients who became friends, and they're in their 90s. One recently passed away. The one who passed away, and they're in a top-notch kind of home here called the Belmont on Wilshire, and sort of state-of-the-art thing. And the one who passed away had Alzheimer's, and he got, and I knew this guy for about 15 years, or 20 years, but he lost his memory for all those most recent events over the last couple of decades. He couldn't hold them. He could hold relationships that he had, 30, 40, 50, 60, 80. He was 97 when he passed away years ago, but he couldn't hold that. So after a while I stopped, but he got very nervous when I went to see him, and because he couldn't place me. And that anxiety, I found difficult to handle. And so I tried to handle it. One way was I would call ahead and tell his keeper, so to speak, because he had a day nurse, that I was coming, and the nurse would tell him that I was coming so he could place me in his mind before I came. But even that didn't work after a while, so I stopped going. So that I don't know to what extent that is common, where visiting causes a lot of anxiety, and that people try to avoid that. I will say this about the Belmont home: there are tons of visitors there all the time, but that doesn't mean everyone's getting visited. And so I was listening to NPR a couple of weeks ago, and there was a demographer expounding on life expectancy of the millennials. And whereas many people in the current generation are making it into their 90s, they expect it to be very common to live another decade. So people will be dying at 104 to 106 regularly, as opposed to 92 to 96. And so that's something to deal with, how they want that to work. And it's a really tough one to figure out. So I know I heard from several people on this call that they definitely don't want to be in a situation like that. But there is an old proverb about one set of parents can take care of 6 children, but 6 children cannot take care of one set of parents. So I think that's something that we all have to deal with. So it's not so simple. Yeah.
Thank you. Melissa.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think this certainly ended up being the main crux of the story, didn't it? And I think early in the film, there were a couple of women who were talking about Sergio, and they were saying, I wonder why he's here. You know, he's so young. And then, you know, one person pointed out that he had lost his wife, and they all kind of gave a knowing nod about that. And I think, you know, you can look at this film because it's the thing that you're seeing, and you can think, what a sad, lonely place it is to be here without visitors. But what would it have looked like for him if he had stayed at home without his wife? You know, I thought about, I had a grandfather who just passed away in December, who was 102, and his wife passed away 25 years before that. He never dated. He watched his friends die, and he never went out to seek new friendships. And so he spent probably the last 20 years of his life almost entirely alone. And he had, you know, his kids coming over to take care of him, but I think that put a huge burden on them. So there was a lot of resentment that built there. And I looked at that situation as a cautionary tale. And I thought that how sad that is to have nobody who really wants to be around you. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice for him to be in a place like that where there could be people his age? And so I guess it's really just, you know, this is where the cameras were pointing, but what situation is good at that age of your life? I'm not really sure.
Well, if anybody watched 60 Minutes this past last week, there was a wonderful segment about people who living into their late 99s, early 100s,
right,
and retained significant vitality. At some point, almost everybody did not, but they were quite extraordinary. And they talked about not only genetic good luck, but also resilience. And resilience isn't just for young people. There are ways people are resilient as they get older, depending on you know, if they prepare themselves, and good luck as well.
Yeah, good genes.
Okay, so Steve, Michael, and Judy.
Okay, so I thought it was a charming movie. I did enjoy it. The captures of the people's facial expressions were masterful. To me, that was 90% of the movie that I particularly enjoyed. Unlike Natalie, I didn't find it depressing, maybe a little scary in the sense that we're kind of picking up the shade a little bit, looking down the road into the future. And could that be us? I mean, it's a little hard to avoid that, I think. But what was the other point I was going to make? Anyways, oh yes, I thought it was a brave movie, a courageous movie in a way, because I can't really think of any other movie I've seen that's willing to focus on the emotionality, the psychology of people that age, and look right into their faces or what they might be going through, make an entire movie about it that you can embrace. It's palatable. I thought in that sense, it was a rather courageous movie and rare.
Right, that's the empathy that I was talking about before. To without flinching, without condemning, to look very plainly at the pain that these people were experiencing and to share it openly with us. It's a privilege, you know, and documentaries can do that. It's a real strength.
It is. Michael?
Yeah, just to jump off of those last few comments, I found one of the most moving scenes to be his birthday party at the home, where when they serenade him and he becomes very emotional, and you understand that he's thinking about his own, you know, relationship gone in his late life. Tremendously moving scene. And also just the film student in me wanted to expand a bit on what Jim said at the beginning on how incredibly well shot this film was. I mean, it's one thing, the scenes in the private investigator's office, which were clearly set up and lit, you know, specifically for effect, even, you know, to the point of having like the strips of light, like from the Venetian blinds across the PI's, shot in the frame, very reminiscent of the old noirs that they were hearkening back to. But in the home as well, where they presumably had much less leeway to, set up their shots beautifully, they were still incredibly well composed. These beautiful static frames that really suited the material very well and allowed the capturing of those facial expressions that I think Steve mentioned.
They shot through a lot of windows as well that provided them cover and therefore more intimacy. But they made some of those window frames part of the shot too, and made it very beautiful.
Yeah.
So very sensitively done. But I also think what we're seeing is the cameras were just around so much, people reveal themselves. And it's just a very special part of movie making.
Judy?
Yeah, I'll just add one other parallel. I think of it's almost like a documentary version of a Salgado photo book. So I think of Sebastião Salgado, who's willing to show the human condition in all of its states, right? Maybe the beautiful, but also the horrible, or the sad, or the difficult, or the tragic, or whatever. And it's kind of reminds me of that kind of approach of someone like Salgado, but on a documentary level.
Yeah, Steve is referring to a documentary we saw on Sebastião Salgado, the Brazilian. You could call him a war photographer, but he's much more than that. And the film is called Salt of the Earth. It's not the drama by the same name. And it's really worth seeing because it's sociological and humanistic. And it's all about humanity. 50,000 workers swarming over a gold mine, climbing makeshift ladders, oil fires in Iraq, and all kinds of perilous situations, as well as modest situations. And it's definitely worth seeing. I'd run it again, except that so many of us have seen it.
Judy?
Well, I had a couple things. I wanted to respond to what Melissa said, and I think you're completely right about, that your grandfather probably would have been better off in a place with other people. When my mom was probably around the age that most of us are now, maybe slightly older, we went and visited older aunts in places like that. And, she said, "Oh, I never want to be in a place like this." And I said, "Mom, you never will be." And she is happy now that she is where she is because of exactly what we said. She has friends, she plays mahjong. And, she says she doesn't know what she would have done during the pandemic if she had been in her condo in Northbrook, Illinois by herself. It would have been an absolute nightmare. So there is a place for places like this. And Joe, about visiting, boy, I don't blame you how hard it must have been to visit when somebody became all agitated. But in the movie, let's remember the whole raison d'etre for the guy being there was to spy and see if this woman's mother was being well taken care of, which she was, but we never saw the daughter come to visit her own mother. Hardly anybody ever gets any visitors, which is really, really sad.
Yeah,
and then I wanted to ask you,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, do you have any idea if the people in the home got to see the movie and how it was received?
I have no idea. I don't know. They probably did. They would have been pleased. I don't think anybody,
I think so.
Just to see, oh my God, we were special enough for somebody to pay attention to us.
Right. And I looked good. I should have had my hair done.
And there was a scene. This is done in nursing homes today. Periodically, they'll call in a team of hairdressers and give people mani-pedis as well.
Totally. My mother's place has an in-house hairdresser. These people get their hair done. Don't ask me why.
Because they feel better. They have it's part of their identity. And
my mom was complaining that the woman wasn't there during the pandemic. And oh my God, my hair looks so terrible.
Right.
Joe?
Yeah, I just had a couple more thoughts. One was maybe this is a somewhat self-selected group who are lonely. And other than the group of seniors who are mobility challenged and need help, And the other group who are cognitively challenged and must be taken care of, many of the other seniors maybe can find a way to stay with family, and therefore they're not that lonely. So this group, they were not, this group was primarily ambulatory group that we saw here. A few of them had, walkers and stuff like that, but they were, so they didn't have all special physical needs that you would see in some of these, senior centers. So anyway, so maybe this is a very lonely group, self-selected lonely group, and they went for that reason because they were lonely. They didn't have siblings or a spouse or something like that, or children available to take care of them, or children maybe who are not living in the same city, Judy, like you're not living in the same city or even in the same area of the country as your mother. So I don't know. The other thing, just an observation, may have something. The other thing was surprised me. I had rewritten the end in my mind, and I assumed he was going to stay there.
That would have been the Hollywood version.
Yeah, that was my reason for this.
Moved into Berta's room because it had a view of the square. Setting up a sequel for the next, the first fight, in the next
get married to whoever it was who wanted to marry him.
No, I want to say it did look like the home, the administrators really did what they could to keep people stimulated. There were parties and birthday parties, an anniversary. There was the parade in the street with the Volkswagen with flowers. It was charming in its own way, but I think what we're seeing is no matter how creative the social directors are, you're going to get lonely because you're not with your family. And these people don't mean as much to you as your family. Yeah, let's mute everybody except Fern and Hannah and myself.
Yeah,
talking.
We have a lot of feedback happening. Randy, you'd like to say something, please?
I guess being around geriatric patients.
We're having a little difficulty hearing you.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
That's better.
Okay. This work around with geriatric patients, there's kind of like this saying amongst some groups. They say you can't be a sissy and get old because you have to have that resilience and I guess just being able to withstand the medical conditions and also the loneliness involved. So I guess that I guess some of them I know a few elderly people kind of see themselves as being they're just being tough. They're basically living their life and making the best of it because they are resilient and they see themselves I'm just going to hold out just as long as I can.
So attitude makes a difference, is what you're saying, Randy.
Yeah, yes, very much so. Yeah,
time.
I guess having attitude, and I guess also having some humor in it. I'm still here. I'm still hanging here, and I'm not gone yet. And so it's kind of like to say, I'm still here, and I just everything's not perfect, but say I'm making the best of it, and say and while I'm doing it, I'm trying to make some humor in it.
Mm-hmm. I guess a corollary to that is oops, someone's open.
Sorry.
The best revenge is to live long enough to become a burden to your children. Not so great for that.
Yeah,
and to enjoy it.
And laugh about it.
Yeah.
Arlene?
Yeah, I felt that this was a totally delightful film. I loved it. I loved the way the people were acting out as if they were much younger. I thought when he was crowned king and he was dancing with an assortment of different women during the proceeding, it was just delightful. The birthday party, of course, we talked about, and that was adorable. and he was becoming Inspector Clouseau. He was turning over every possible tide to find Sonia. I thought it was wonderfully done. And the sad parts, of course, are you live long enough, you see enough, and you see everything, and it's still not enough. But to see these women descending on him as soon as he got here, as soon as he got to the place, you remember that they're all starting talking about him, how good looking he is and what a gentleman he seems to be. Right away, they were on their game looking at this guy as he was Mr. Hot. And it just was very real to me. And of course, there are sad parts about aging and losing parts of your memory. And I have a friend who's married 57 years and he doesn't know his wife anymore. And that's terrible. And she's living with it, and it's terrible because he doesn't even know he's living with it. But I thought the handling of everybody's situation was very good. In fact, he discovered that Marta was the thief, but that didn't come out. He didn't report it to the supervisor. He became one of those inmates, so to speak. It was very sad to see her trying to get out of the place behind the bars of the home, you know, like she was imprisoned.
Arlene, let me interrupt for a second. I think he did report it.
I don't
because
remember that.
He found the necklace with the gemstone, and he's arguing.
Right, but then he denied it because it wasn't a medallion; it was stone, etc. He didn't turn her in. I don't think. That's not what I remember.
But let's talk about ourselves as the audience. When we learned, oh, it's Marta that's doing it, did we feel that she was really a thief? Because we knew as much as we knew about her. She was a child, you know, longing for her mommy. She lost her satchel with her textbooks in it. So she was a schoolgirl. It's like, it's a forgivable crime because of who she was and her limitations.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Fern.
I'd like to just comment on something Arlene mentioned about how sad it is, you know, when the person doesn't remember somebody. But on that same show on 60 Minutes, they had a woman who had been quite beautiful and very put together, and at the age of 97 was taking nice brisk walks, and she was quite amazing. And then a few years later, she lost it, really, and you could see her eyes dimmed, and she could not remember very much, and she could not remember her mother. She said she couldn't remember her mother. They asked her, and she said, no, I can't. And they asked her a number of things, and then they asked her if she was sad about it, and she said, no, not really. She didn't remember her, but she said, I do other things. I play cards today or whatever. So in some ways, some of it is sadder for those of us watching it, and because we do remember, and we also are fearful and see ourselves, you know, we see the end of the line, but not necessarily always as sad for the person in it. I think the same thing happened to Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, who stepped off a lifetime appointment as a Supreme Court justice to take care of her husband of 60 years who had Alzheimer's. And promptly upon retiring from the bench, she found a girlfriend in the nursing home, had no recollection of her whatsoever. And that was that. But he wasn't sad. She was sad.
Right. it's kind of a reflexive response when you realize you've forgotten something or you're losing your memory. It's like you don't even know yourself, and it's very unsettling. And we've heard several people report on that tonight.
Roz?
I want.
Can I one more comment? I think Roz Rabel would like to speak. Unmute yourself, Roz.
Jim, I wanted to know why you chose this movie.
Frankly, I thought it was something we could all relate to because of the demographic we are all in, for the most part. We all have had parents and grandparents. We've seen them get ill. And I think it would. I thought it was going to touch us all. And I also thought it was done with a particularly gentle and light touch that helped it be more effective. It's a real nuanced film. And if you just have the patience to go with it, it's delightful. As sad as their situation may be, Natalie, it's like you're so grateful to these people for having put all this down for us to see. Yeah. It's a real privilege to see inside somebody like that. So
I really enjoyed it, but I wasn't sure exactly why you picked it, but now I know. And it's very touching.
Well, Susie, did you want to add something?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I've had my hand up for a long time.
Susie, you need to raise your hand in the chat because when there are several.
I had the hand in the chat for a long time also. Oh. It doesn't matter. Thank you for calling on me. The first thing I want to talk about is if any of you have been over to Fontainebleau, the tiered housing, the Jewish housing community over by Playa Vista. It is. Has anyone been over there? Yes.
Howard's raising his hand.
Yes, it's beautiful. And it is such a brilliant concept. They have this concept in Japan. They have this concept in England where you move there with, let's say when you're 55 or 60. And in the event that
you're freezing.
I'm sorry.
Susie.
Jim, she's not freezing up. Jim, she's not freezing up. You are.
Yeah. Yes.
Am I okay?
Oh, okay.
You're okay, Susie.
Okay. So if you're there with your husband or the wife or whatever, and one of you get pretty sick, they have a what Charlene has. Charlene is not a senior home to stay there. Charlene's place is rehab. They have a place if you go for a surgery and you live at Fontainebleau and a beautiful condominium with every amenity and drivers and this and that and the other, everything. Unfortunately, it's probably way too expensive for any of us. But if the thoughts of the future, we are spending lots of money on preschools and lots of money on education, and the scale isn't even. As someone said in this in our group tonight, we're going to be living longer. I saw that show, Fern, and when we get to be 102, we need to have a good place to be able to live, especially if we're healthy or our brain is healthy. My mother lived to be 96. She was very lucky. She saved a lot of money and she had money and she lived in Ocean House. It was the happiest place she ever lived in. We had dances. We had, just like Judy's mother, she had a beauty shop there. The men could get their hair done. There were many, many more women than men. And it was a healthy place for my mother to spend the last 7 years of her life. You know, she would always say to everybody, my daughter put me here, my daughter put me here. But then when I would go there, or I would sort of hide behind a door and I would look at her, she was the belle of the ball. Everybody was chit-chatting and whatever. My daughter put me here. She put me here. And, you know, of course they're going to say that. I'll probably say this. No, I won't say that. I won't, because I know that in my 10 or 15 years from now, I want to be with people I have things in common with. I can't be hanging around with 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds. I want to hang around with people my age that have a zest for life. And there were plenty of people at Ocean House like that. Plenty of them.
Thank you. Is there anyone else, Fern? I do want to move on.
I think you could move it on.
Okay, so there's a turning point in this movie, and it's 90 minutes long, but at 59 minutes in, so that's like 2/3 of the way through. Sergio has an argument with Romulo over the reports, or about, Romulo says, don't push too hard when you're asking about the medicines. It looks suspicious. And he takes offense at this. And then later they have another argument where he's been sick for a few days and hasn't given a report. And Romulo is pressing him for a report. And he says, you have to respect me as a person. And here we see signs of him, of Sergio pushing back. And he says at one point, I'm a person too, and you have to respect me. So this is not just an employee's revolt. This is, I'm getting involved here and you have to let me do it my way or I can't do it at all.
Jim, you're freezing. Jim, if you can hear me, hang up and come back in.
Fern?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think next week we should be looking at the movie Soylent Green. The flip side of this.
Yes.
Anybody remember this movie?
No. Tell what the premise is.
Yes,
They take the old people and turn them into food.
No. Was that the one with
Must be
Charlton
Soylent Green.
Heston?
Yeah,
Yes. And Edward G. Robinson. Who's
It was a very well done film. But it was very close to you don't want to see that.
You know, the comment that Susie made about this place that she said was probably so expensive, that's why my mother is in Tennessee. I mean, my brother and his family live there, so it wasn't just arbitrary, but the cost of the place in Tennessee is less than half of the place that's on Overland with across from the studio that's primarily a Jewish place. I wanted her to go there, but twice the cost.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, so
Jim,
let's
go
move-
ahead.
All right. So I'm sorry about my freezing up on you guys. But he brings Mrs. Rubira photos of her children and grandchildren and asks her to identify them. And she's very moved. She finally recognizes a grandchild. But what does this say about Sergio? It says he's beginning to volunteer things. He's no longer just a spy. He's interacting one-on-one with them. And he's doing things for them to help them. So what this means is you're getting involved with your target, right? Cardinal rule of spying is never to do that, right? Even if you're seducing them, right? You can't get involved. Well, he is. And then there comes that phone call of I'm a person too. And he then sends his letter, his long email message about what's really wrong with these people, that they're lonely. And he sort of does this exposition of what loneliness is and blames the relatives for not showing up. And then he says, get me out of here. My mission's done. So I think what we're seeing, and maybe it starts in his own birthday celebration when Marta touches him, you know, and he doesn't recoil, and it's a great move for her. And he's weepy while they're singing because he's so happy. He doesn't get this in his own apartment, you know, even from his own kids. They came to see him, but this is some newfound fan group. And what we're seeing is he's no longer a spy, he's a resident there, and he has relationships with people. So he's bonding. And that's why he says, I can't spy anymore because there's nothing to spy on. These are good people. They're well taken care of. And we have to put more of the burden on the children. But that loneliness monologue is really worth listening to. And then probably the grandest scene of all, because now the last scene, starting with the funeral, then his speech about what loneliness is and what's wrong with everybody there. Then we have his departing scene after it's announced he's going to be leaving. He's sitting down with Marta, right? And he's sitting down with Sonia. Sonia wouldn't even talk to him the first couple of days, or first couple of times he encountered her. And they're like his two best friends there. And they're all kind of weepy together. And it's like, it's come full circle. He's really going to miss them, which I found was so emotional. Without that scene, I think it just would have gone flat, but it's really an emotional climax to the whole process. And then the last shot of the movie is very special. Berta is on her balcony, probably the one room in the whole place that has a balcony, fixing her flowers, and the camera tilts down and you see Romulo leading Sergio away from the facility. It's touching. And Roz, that's the stuff, sorry, maybe I'm a sentimentalist, but that's the stuff that gets to me when the filmmaker sets us up for a feeling we can't control, and it's like for those of us who are willing to let a movie do that to us, it's why we like movies. Anybody want to chime in?
Yeah, I thought it was also a lesson to all of us in how to deal with a situation that most of us avoid. I mean, I have had people that I had to visit in these homes, and I don't like it. I mean, I find them horrible. I don't care how good they are. They don't smell good. They don't look good. It's depressing. And watching this lovely man interact when people would forget, and how he made it feel better, and how he spent time with them, and what he could say to comfort them. In some ways, I thought it was a wonderful instruction of how you could be in this such a painful, difficult situation and elevate people's lives. And really, it was ennobling. It really was.
Mm-hmm. Somebody in the chat, I don't know which M it was, referred us to a Japanese film, The Ballad of Narayama. Okay, it was Michael.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think senior elephants go off to die alone, and maybe some other mammals do that too. And there's some inherent transmitted DNA that said this is the thing to do. Very touching, much more touching than Soylent Green, which was fascinating.
Mitchell, do you want to just tell us what you mentioned a Korean series on Netflix and how that's related? You want to unmute and just let us know a little bit about that?
My wife is a former ballerina, and the series was about a 70-year-old postman who never wanted to be a postman, but who wanted to be a ballerina. And of course, his children thought this was the most unobjectionable thing could ever happen to their father. And without giving away the rest of the plot, he ages. And he ages with some young people who are shocked to see somebody aging, and how in Korea they deal with the situation in a very, I guess you could say, unique manner. But the series, we're up to, I guess, number 8 out of 12. And I find it very emotional. Every one of them is just very touching for me.
Great. Something to look at.
We would be remiss not to mention the Kaminsky
method,
in which you actually have a series with major stars who are old and dealing with issues of age, and they're both funny and touching. It's very charming.
Yeah, and that's Alan Arkin, and who else?
It was Alan Arkin and Michael Douglas.
Michael Douglas, yeah, it's fabulous.
And a bunch of other really wonderful cast members. Paul Reiser.
It's terrific.
Not ready to see him as an old person.
But
it
the
was
last season, which just aired,
right,
includes Kathleen Turner,
who was magnificent.
She comes back as
absolutely
she's his
magnificent.
ex-wife, yeah.
Yeah, she was the star of the show. She looks terrible. She's been ill and suffers from.
But she's wonderful.
She was magnificent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, are there any other comments about this movie? Because I can segue into something we have special coming
Can
up.
I ask a question? When he was making his pitch to his boss and telling him why he hadn't reported yet, I thought he was making up the story about having been sick the previous day or two.
Well, he sold me, so I don't know for sure, but there was something a little off about him. He seemed a little tired and short-tempered. So I could see that for whatever reason, he's saying, get off my back. I'm going to do this my way because these are my people. That's the bigger message.
That was it, right.
Yeah. All right. This
Hold
provides
on,
me.
I'm sorry, one last comment. Somebody who hasn't spoken. Mickey, you want to unmute?
Hi, Mickey. Mickey Alter. Where's
Hi. Yes, I think it's amazing how the filmmakers made this, and it turned out to be so that this character, this man that they chose, was so perfect for the part. When they didn't know how it was going to turn out. Is that correct? They didn't really know that he would be. I mean, send a letter like that, which said, there's nothing wrong with anything going on here, except that these people are lonely and no one visits them. And how tragic that is.
I mean, you can imagine the filmmakers who didn't really know what the guy would do.
How did they ever come up with this idea? It's incredible.
It's documentary. You never know how it's going to end up when you start shooting it. Stuff happens. And it's part of the nimble decision-making that documentary people have to make, both on the spot and then long-term when they decide what they're doing with editing. How do we deal with it? You know, what can we get out of this that we hadn't anticipated? What have we learned from it? What do we need to share now that we know more? So it's this very brave and daring lesson in spending other people's money to shoot something that may not turn out okay.
What did you do? Do you think was their objective to begin with? Was it to humanize these people as they age? Was it to?
I don't know. You'd have to look up the press reviews from her. I think it was just a very cool concept, infiltrating a nursing facility like this or home, and saying, well, let's see what we get. You know, the premise is great, underground spy, and they certainly saved it. Had they tried to tell this like a straight crime story, it would have lost its charm. I mean, the music, the treatment of the scenes, it was just done with such a light but knowing touch. You know, totally looped most of us in.
That's amazing. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, so a very different kind of movie, and I have to say, very different kinds of movies will follow this. We're going to have a joint, if the group is up for it, I'm going to ask us to look at two films, one of which you may have seen before, and one was a recent Academy Award-winning film for Anthony Hopkins, The Father. And the prior film that also won an award for Julianne Moore is Still Alice. These are two very different films about Alzheimer's patients. Julianne Moore plays a younger woman with early onset Alzheimer's, and it's her relationships with her family and how she comes to cope with her own disease. And Anthony Hopkins is about somebody who's already deep into Alzheimer's, but it's a very different kind of film that's totally centered on him and not at all about how the family feels about it. It's told in a very unusual, fractured, out of time way. And both films are very powerful in terms of getting us to focus on how the patient, the victim, feels trapped inside their brain, their bodies, how the memories escape them. They feel lost and terrified at times, but also the sadness. And together, these two films probably do the most to educate us about the condition of Alzheimer's. And we're going to have a guest for this dual evening. We're going to have one of the producers of Still Alice and a woman who is a member of Wilshire Boulevard Temple now, Elizabeth Stearns. She lost her mother to Alzheimer's and started the Judy Fund, which is quite an active fundraiser for research and treatment techniques, as well as family counseling for Alzheimer's families. And she's going to be our guest and help us untangle the process and the family dynamics. She'll, if there's time, she can tell us what's being done in contemporary research into Alzheimer's. And I don't mind asking you to see both films because they're both such excellent films.
What's the date?
We don't have a date for that yet. It will be in July. Okay. But I really hope that you'll invest the time in the two films, and that's why I'm giving you advance notice. Still Alice and The Father. Terrific, terrific films. And you're going to talk to the producer of one of them, who's a congregant and a very involved woman in the field of Alzheimer's research, treatment, and care. Next week, on the 12th, we're going to see Namesake, which is a film directed by Mira Nair, an Indian director who's very skillful. And this is about an Indian family that immigrates, young couple immigrates to the United States and raises their family there and has two very American kids. And of course, the first generation of any wave of immigration is very different from the first generation immigrants. And it's all about what they share and don't share and how they drift away from the fold and back into it. It's so much like a Jewish immigration story or any immigration story. I mean, and that's why I freely programmed it. There's nothing Jewish about it other than this is a story of how displaced people make a new home and the family stresses that causes. Irfan Khan, who was in The Lunchbox, if you saw that film, stars in this as the father. It's a beautiful cast, so well acted and directed. It's such a good film. Again, if it's a good film and there's meaning to it, I'm going to ask us to look at it because I know we'll all get something about it. Like, I'm so glad that you all got something out of The Mole Agent. And to me, our discussion tonight was very humanistic in its values, not only Jewish in its values. It's about people caring for other people and understanding their situations. On the 16th, our next class, which will be Wednesday. Sorry, I don't mean to call this a class. This is a discussion. We're going to see Crescendo. And Crescendo is an Israeli film. And the first time I watched it, I wasn't a fan of it, except for the middle section. And I'll tell you why. It's actually the true story of the orchestra conductor, Daniel Barenboim. And the film takes place in his retirement years. He's back conducting in Berlin, a modest orchestra, and he's approached by some cabinet minister, cabinet level person from Israel, saying, we want to start a youth orchestra and bring Israeli kids and Palestinian kids together with classical music, and we want you to conduct it and lead it. And he says, why are you, calling on me? My parents were Nazis. And he said, well, we're calling on you because you're a good conductor and you're available, perhaps. And he accepts the job. And of course, not all goes smoothly because you have children, young adults, 16 to 24. And it exposes all the biases that Palestinians and Israelis have for each other, the impediments. There's also a love story across ethnic lines. Had to be that. I think they invented that. And they're harassed so much in Israel that they go to a small place in Italy so they can rehearse together for a big competition in Europe. And what the conductor does is he realizes there are insurmountable problems. How can you play together if you don't understand each other? So the middle part of the film is this fascinating look at encounter therapy, taken straight from the psychology playbook, of games and exercises that you do with each other to help you understand each other globally. This works across all cultures. And you get to participate in these exercises. It's not a painfully long or it's a very fascinating section, because again, like this movie, instead of by over time people revealing themselves, the pressure of the games that they play reveals who they are and where they're blocked from understanding other people. Rabbi Nanus suggested this to me, and when I looked at it again, I said, yes, we should do that, especially in because of the turmoil in Israel now. But for these central games alone, it's really worth seeing. So it's an exercise in getting to understand somebody else who's very different from you and maybe antithetical to you or opposed to you. So that's a Wednesday night. That's reserved. Wednesday nights are reserved for guests to make sure we can get them. And Elizabeth is a friend of my family's. Our kids grew up with her kids and went to University Synagogue, mommy and me together, and that far back. And so we're looking forward to that. And beyond that, that's on the 16th. And then on the 26th, we're going to see a very challenging film. It's another documentary.
Excuse me, I'm going to interrupt you for one second. I think the Saturday.
Namesake is the 12th, a Saturday.
Right.
Crescendo is Wednesday the 16th.
Thank you.
And Winter Journey is the 26th, another Saturday. Okay. We'll see if this, we had a very good response to the Wednesday night session. So we're going to keep trying those, but not, we'll keep trying until we decide what to do. We'll keep some Saturdays for sure. Winter Journey is another documentary. I didn't know it was a documentary when I saw it first. It happens to star Bruno Ganz. Those of you who saw The Tobacconist, he plays Sigmund Freud. I'm not going to program that for you because it's too simplistic a film for our taste. Not that it wasn't fun to watch, but I didn't think there's much to discuss in it. And it's a story of a Jewish man who flees Germany. He was a musician and fled with his wife and wind up in America playing at one symphony or another. She was a musician as well. And 60 years after the Holocaust, his son comes to interview him. The son you never meet. He's off camera and he's a voice. And it's really a father-son confrontation about, Dad, why did you never talk about the war years and what you were doing and what made you flee and what happened to your family? And we've talked about this in all our Holocaust movies before, is why are survivors so unwilling to share their trauma? Not all of them, but many are. They don't want to subject their loved ones to the horrors that they experienced, and they don't want to re-experience it for themselves. This is a very granular examination of what the father is hiding. And there's no big secret, nothing huge. It's tragic. But the point is, it's a one-on-one. You spend 90 minutes with Bruno Ganz as though you're behind the camera following him. It's a remarkable piece of acting. It's so natural. You'll think it's a documentary. It's just a staged script. It's based on 2 books that a guy did write about his father. So that is Winter Journey, and we'll see what July holds for us. But because we have this great publicity machine called Wilshire Boulevard Temple, thank you, Hannah Gohl and others in your office, we can now announce films way in advance and really run with it. So you have more than just a week to see these films.
Right.
If you look at the recent Wilshire Boulevard Temple at Home, you'll see all 3 of them listed. They're all available on Netflix or Amazon Prime. And if you have any other suggestions, I'm certainly open to seeing films you would like to bring to the group. And that's where we are. It's sort of time to say goodnight. I'm so glad that you people got a lot out of this film. Roz Rabo, I was a little worried because it's not a glamorous film in any way, but it really strikes close to home. And I think that's what we're about.
Jim, are you sure about Amazon or Netflix? The newsletter said
right.
coming out.
Winter Journey will be available on Vimeo, and we'll have Vimeo links for you the week of.
That was true of Crescendo also.
Yes, that's also. These are high flicks. You don't have to pay to rent them. We're going to pay for the subscription. But the way we see them globally is that they will send us. We have a 4-day viewing window. For Crescendo, we're going to have it from Saturday the 12th to Wednesday the 16th. And for Winter Journey, we'll have it from like Tuesday or Wednesday through Saturday. So
I will miss you all for a few weeks.
We'll miss you too, Fern. Thank you for your help.
Thank.
And please, my email is at the top of the chat if you want to email me for any reason. I'm so glad to see new faces aboard. And those of you longer term Wilshire Boulevard members, if you want to share your experience with the group, please do. We're right for some people and maybe not for others, and that's okay. But I'm sure if you want to talk to anybody else in the group too, this is very typical. We share a lot. We teach each other from the observations each of us makes about the film. All right, so see you next Saturday night. Looking forward to it. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
I'll be at a wedding next Saturday night, so I won't be there.